Michael Cameneti, it's a big day, my friend. I've had a few years of podcasting before, and I have never done anything officially for Matt Drones On. So this is Matt Drones On. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Sure thing, man. Thanks for having me. It's awesome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. So I usually do audio. I do audio only usually for Entre Nito, my other podcast. But I'm excited to learn today about Matt Drones On and just kind of your take through LA and the filmmaking and your story and your journey of kind of how you got to where you are today. More recently, you released Be Good, right? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Yeah. So awesome 2-minute shot, 2-minute storytelling with it's your son, right? It's kind of like a storytelling kind of prayer thing that he's narrating, which is really cool. So we're going to share that out as well. But I've known Michael for, years. And it's been a while since we've recently talked more recently, but the earliest memory I have of you is we were playing drums together, and I remember you were playing on my kit, and I think you hit your knuckle or something, and so you started like bleeding onto my snare drum. Do you remember this? It's been a long time.
Dude, I think so. Was it at like a summer camp or
yeah,
something?
it was probably I was probably like 15, so it was like 25 years ago. But yeah, I just remember that. I was just like, it's pretty epic, dude. It was like the most epic moment of drumming that I've ever had. So but yeah, so I feel like I've known you for a long time. Of course, know your family and everything like that. And one thing about Michael for the audience is that like when he puts his mind to something, like he's good at everything he does. So he's a sick bass player, sick musician, and you do a lot of work for Music Bed. Is that right?
Yeah. I probably have like 4 or 5 albums
That's
on
so
Music
great.
Bed of just like cinematic scores and stuff.
Very
Yep.
cool. And we'll put all that like in the show notes and comments as well too for this interview. But I just wanted you to come out today and talk to the people. Thanks for coming out. So the goal today is just to get better footage with drones. Like for me, like we talked off air, I've been droning for probably 2 to 3 months, and I just absolutely love it. And the joke is, the reason it's called Matt Drones On is because I found myself like cornering friends and family, just freaking out, losing my mind. I'm 40 now, so I'm this middle-aged white guy. It's time for me to start droning. Any kind of droning footage that I see from the drone pilots, they're usually older or middle-aged white guys is what I find. So that's my tribe, I guess, if you want to call it that. But it's been super fun to learn though. And so right now, before we get into our topic, I'm kind of the audio settings. I don't really know yet. I'm learning. I'm shooting 4K. I'm like, okay, shooting to the sun because that looks cool. And I'm just trying to trial and error. So today I would love to talk to you because you are a professional who's worked with some of the biggest brands in the world to get incredible content. I'd love to know more about how we can do that. But before we do, I'd love for you to promote away anything you have, websites, content, anything that for the people we can share out today.
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you for all the kind words. That means a lot. And yeah, it's good to finally connect again, and glad to, share what I know to help the audience and stuff. So yeah, I have, michaelcamenetifilms.com.
Okay.
That's where all my like commercial work is. And, like you said, yeah, I've done commercials for Coca-Cola, AT&T, Bridgestone, Samsung. Been fortunate enough to be able to work with some of those brands and create commercial work. And so that's like my main gig, is doing commercials and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like you'd mentioned, the Be Good short film we just released. It's been shared by like Film Shortage and Shelter Shorts and a couple other outlets online. So that's been a lot of fun. That's what I do as my main gig. And then I just launched an online film course called the Filmmaker Pro, where there's actually a free 45-minute film class people can take, where we talk about the top 5 things that you can do to elevate your film game. And then from there, you can obviously opt in to actually purchasing the film course. So I've been doing that for a couple months now. Got a lot of students inside there. Been helping a lot of people. So that's, I've been doing this since I want to say 99, so just over 20 years.
Wow, that's great.
And one of the best things, and I do say this with all honesty, one of the greatest things that I've found is to just be able to give back. So I love doing stuff like this because I know a lot of filmmakers that struggle, whether it's shooting on a cinematic camera, a DSLR, a drone, and they get to that point where they're just like, why doesn't this look good? Why doesn't it look cinematic? So I love stuff like this, man. I think it's great that you're doing this, and anything that I can do to help other people along their journey, I'm happy to do it. But yeah, I've got a film supply account and music bed like we discussed. So I sell music scores on the music bed, or they're more kind of like that cinematic vibe. And then I license clips on Film Supply, which are more like those cinematic clips. I have a whole thing of aerials inside of there as well from past like short films, a couple aerial shots in that Be Good short film that we released too.
Yeah.
So I love aerials, man. I think that anytime when it serves the story and it fits, I think when you can do really cinematic, great aerial shots, it just gives you it's a great way to, set up a scene, to establish a scene in your film. And when you do it right, it's just, it really brings you in as the audience. It really sets that tone and really gives the audience a new perspective. So I think when you do it right, it's really important. So yeah, that's
so
my
sweet.
spiel so far.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, so we'll put all that in the show notes as well. You guys can check that out. And so I'd love to kind of hear some of your backstory too for our audience, kind of how on earth did you get to LA and the journey from Ohio to LA and things like that.
I'm still trying to figure it out too. I don't know how I got here. No.
Wake up here, like, what in the world?
Yeah. So, oh man. So you and I come, from the church background, right? So my father is a minister from Ohio, and I think it was probably like 96, 97. I was about 16, 17 years old. I started to really get into music, started playing bass, drums, guitar, all those sorts of things. And I think anytime you get into music or any of the arts, they're kind of like, all encompassing. I loved music. I love video. I love film.
Sure. We
used to do like goofy, like with my dad when we were little, like commercials with his like, just ginormous VHS camera.
Yeah.
And I always remember making like silly videos as a kid. So I've always just been drawn to music and to video. And then I think it was probably about 98. The church was starting to get into video stuff. I think it was like probably around like the DVX 100A or Canon XL1 stage of life where it was like mini DV was like the hot new thing, 3C CD chip. So I kind of got into it from there, did some TV show stuff. And just from there, man, it was like working at the church was like 10 years of college for me, just figuring it out, learning it. Back then there was no YouTube.
Yeah.
So you really had to just like dig in and watch stuff and then, try to apply that, which was very difficult. And then in about 2009, I went to work at a production house in Canton, Ohio, where they were doing stuff. I mean, 6-figure jobs, like really large commercial work. And I originally got hired as a score, like doing scores, music scores, a film composer. And then the CEO found out I could shoot, and he pulled me aside. And your drone audience will love this, but he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we're going to start this YouTube channel all about drones." And this was 2010.
Perfect.
And it ended up being Flight Test, which now has like 1.5 million subscribers.
Sweet. Yeah.
So I started that with him, man. I remember it's actually a pretty funny story. We started the show, and Chad Capper, who at the time was the CEO of the production company and also the guy that was starting Flight Test, it was him and another guy named Dave Knopp. And they were the hosts of Flight Test, and I was behind camera. And it was just, and we talk about this a lot, it was bad. It was so bad. It was so awkward. The flow was horrible. And Chad kept coming to me like, in the edit room, we got to make this work. We got to make this work. And I was just like, dude, I'm sorry, but I can't do anything with this. It's horrible. It's awkward. And so one of my best friends, who actually, funny enough, me and Josh Scott used to make videos when we were kids all the time.
I didn't realize that.
I've known Josh since I was like 8, 9 years old.
Josh is hilarious.
Yeah. So I went to Chad and I was like, "Hey man, what do you think about getting a talent like somebody like Josh, who is goofy, he's funny, he's great on camera." And he was like, we both, like, the light bulbs went off. He was like, "Oh my gosh." He's like, "I know a guy named Josh Bixler who's amazing at drones." He's like, Josh Scott could be like the guy who doesn't know, and Josh could be the teacher. And it was the Josh and Josh Flight Test show. And it just, from the first episode, we knew we had something special. And from there, we got a sponsorship from Hobby King right away, which was amazing. They flew us out to LA in 2010, which was my first time here.
Okay.
In LA. And I knew right when I got here, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to be out here. We did shows with Corey Feldman
Yeah.
from The Goonies and, Stand By Me. So that was fun. So yeah, man, just from there, I started to really get into drone footage and flight test and rotor riot is another one that Chad started after flight test. I have a pretty decent relationship with those guys. There's the sport drone world where it's like the drone racing and all the crazy stuff that they do. I mean, some of those guys, like, I don't know if you know Mr. Steele. I shot some stuff with Mr. Steele. I think it's Steele FPV or something.
Okay.
He's a great guy. But I shot some stuff with him. But then there's this other side, which I love, which is the cinematic drone stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that I'm going to do in what I shoot, for university spots, for short films. Be Good, that one has a couple really great aerial shots.
Yeah.
Last year I did a short film in Pittsburgh called Ticks. And we did some really good drone aerial cinematography. Balint Oltvai is his name. He's in Pittsburgh. He's a phenomenal drone pilot.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
But yeah, man, I just really enjoy, like I said a minute ago, just getting, making sure that those settings, because I think one of the things people do is just like they turn their drone on and like, all right, let's just go shoot.
Yep.
And it really does take a lot more than just turning it on and going for it, And one of the things that I teach inside of the Filmmaker Pro is those things are universal. The fundamentals of setting up your camera are universal from DSLR. If you're shooting on a RED, if you're shooting on a drone, most of the time those principles are going to apply. You're going to want the lower ISO if it's bright, so that you've got the least amount of grain possible. Sometimes, if you want a little bit more shallow depth of field, like if you're kind of like tracking around a building, and you want the background to fall off in the distance, instead of shooting at like an f22 aperture, you could shoot wide open at, like, if the drone does an f2.8 or an f4, you can throw neutral density on the front of it, so it brings down the exposure and keeps those cinematic settings where the shallow stays or the depth of field stays pretty shallow. So there's a lot of little tricks like that instead of just turning your drone on and going for it,
right?
Shooting 4K. Sometimes these drones have these super wide angle things that kind of give you that warped, the landscape. It kind of looks warped. So little things like that it's all those little wins that if you can set your camera up, those little things make such a difference. Yeah. When you put that footage next to, a RED or a Canon C300 or an Arri Alexa, obviously the best thing to do, I think the best thing to do is to, get like a Tilta or like a Free Fly, one of those giant, enormous drones that can carry an Alexa Mini or a RED. Oh, yeah. But if you can't, a lot of times I've shot a lot recently with the DJI Mavic and the Mavic Pro. The Mavic Pro 2 actually, I think, is what we shot for this recent short film. Okay. It stands out, man. It'll hold up right with most of the other footage like Pocket 6K or like RED stuff that we've been shooting on. It's really about knowing the fundamentals of cinematography and being able to apply that to your drone camera settings. Because a lot of these drones now, I'm not too familiar on the technical side, but I think like the drone, I think it's the Mavic Pro 2 or one of them uses the, it starts with a Z, I forget the name, but it's a specific camera and lens that it uses. Okay. It gets away from like the stock camera on the drone.
There was one that was like a Hasselblad, or I don't even know if I'm saying it right, on the Mavic 2, because I see that underneath the lens. I forget the exact title of it, but I don't know if that's what you're referring to. There's probably other things too that's on there, but
I think there's a couple different ones like the Zhiyun or okay. I'm botching the name of it.
Me too. I'm like,
but I think anytime you can get away from like GoPro or just putting up, a lot of these guys with their racing drones, they're like the little tiny cameras that shoot 4K, but it's shooting so wide. And one of the biggest giveaways to me of amateur cinematography, drone cinematography, is the auto exposure.
Really? Okay.
You know, when your camera's like if you're panning down and you see the exposure adjusting, you know, if you kind of do a move where you point up toward the sky and you can tell it's just stopping down and trying to figure out.
Yeah.
When you go to manual and you set these things, you know, if you're shooting into the sun and getting those beautiful lens flares, it's just those little things that can really help take your drone cinematography from looking like a guy that just took it out of the box to a guy that looks like he's been doing it for 10 years.
No, that's so cool. Yeah, because that's kind of the things too. If I could just have you unpack that a little bit more, because you know the point of this show is to help you shoot better drone footage, learn more about your camera, and I would say I'm more of a noob that's learning how to do it right. And so I have no, you know, video background as far as like all settings. I don't know. I don't have a nice, really any digital camera. It's usually just the iPhone, you know, X, and that's
Sure.
about it. But so what were you saying as far as the ISO? So for example, let's say let's set up the shot. So let's say you're at the beach and it's super sunny. Like what would you want to, instead of doing auto? Because I know that there's the auto white balance, which I'm sure is kind of a joke to like a professional like yourself. You're like, okay, I'm going to set it to sunny, perfect, I'm ready to go. And I'm sure you could get some good footage, but I don't think you're getting the full potential. So if you're in a beach scene, for example, and it's super sunny, super bright, you said to lower the ISO, and what would those settings be? Like, I know you can't tell exactly, but like maybe something to kind of shoot for.
Sure. And again, I'm not a drone pilot,
Right.
so I'm not 100% on all of the settings on all drones that are out there. But I'll tell you how I would approach it if I had a drone pilot, or even if I was, you know, gonna throw a red up on a drone or something. So
Okay, cool.
typically the rule of thumb is, you know, if you're outside and it's really bright, you want to shoot daylight, right? So you can set it to daylight or set it to, you know, 5,600 Kelvin.
Okay.
That's where you want to be with that. And then, you know, your ISO, I think most drones kind of follow what, you know, most like cinema cameras or DSLRs do. I don't know if there's like a native ISO, but in my opinion, you're going to want to bring that all the way down. You know, bring your ISO down to like, I don't know if they do 100 or if they follow the 320, 640, 800, you know, rule. But you want to have that ISO as low as you can, because the higher ISO, you know, if you're shooting nighttime cinematography, you know, nighttime drone cinematography, you're going to probably have that ISO up to, you know, 800, maybe 1250, something like that, because obviously it's dark. So you want to know, make sure you're capturing
it opens up that,
detail.
and that's essentially like what an ISO is it's letting so much light or less light in.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the camera's exposure.
Okay.
So your camera exposure is you know, if it's really bright, the lower you're going to want the ISO.
Okay.
The darker it is outside, the higher you're going to want that ISO. Now, the other thing you have to think about in conjunction with that is the aperture. Now, the aperture is going to be how much that lens is going to open up and close. So the more that lens opens up its aperture, the more light it's letting in.
Okay.
So here's where it kind of can get tricky. You know, for me, if I'm shooting something with a handheld camera and I'm shooting somebody and I kind of want that background to fall off and it be really dreamy, you know, and the background is just kind of, you know, it's all blurry. We call that a shallow depth of field.
Okay.
You're going to want to take your aperture and open it all the way up. You know, if your camera's lens can do a 1.4 or a 1.8 or a 2.8. Now, the problem is, if it's really sunny, even if you bring your ISO all the way down to about a 100, if you open up your lens all the way, it's going to be completely overexposed, right?
Okay.
So most of the time, these drones come with little neutral density filters that you can screw on the front of the lens.
Okay.
So neutral density is going to knock your exposure back down. So if you want that shallow depth of field, you know, you want to open your aperture up and throw the neutral density on. Sometimes these guys do some really cool drone shots where they're following somebody or they're tracking, you know, if it's like a chase scene and they're tracking a car and they want it to look real cinematic and, you know, have kind of a shallow depth of field. You want that aperture wide open and you're going to put some neutral density on the front.
Okay.
So that knocks your exposure back down and keeps your settings cinematic, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
Here's the thing though. When I'm doing drone cinematography, if I'm going to go wide open with my aperture, the problem with that can be, even if you're shooting 4K, you might lose some of the detail. So if like I'm doing a really nice like slow push into a city and there's mountains in the background and some beautiful clouds, if I'm going to push into that and I'm wide open and I'm throwing aperture or throwing neutral density on there to knock down the exposure, it's so shallow that you're probably not going to have the detail. You know, you might want to see the trees on this mountain or the windows in this building that's a mile away. You're going to lose that. So what I would recommend if you're wanting to maintain the detail in your shot is to bring your aperture down so that you have a deeper depth of field and you're seeing more stuff in the distance.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So for me, if I'm going for like a very high detailed, you know, I mean, I want to see those windows, I want to see those trees, I want to see the detail in the clouds, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to bring that aperture down to probably like an f8, maybe an f11 aperture. So your ISO, you know, is at like maybe 100. Maybe your aperture is at like an f8 or an f11. And if it's still overexposed, maybe throw like, you know, a quarter neutral density, you know, 1-2 stops of neutral density. And that's probably going to be where you're going to want to be.
Okay.
You could probably bring your aperture all the way down to like some of these drones. I think their cameras can come down to like an f22 or something like that.
Yeah.
Most drones are different, but I think, you know, all of them have that capability to be able to stop down that far. And that's going to enable you to see every bit of detail that's in the shot. And if you're shooting into the sun, the more you stop down, the more little trails of sun flares that you're going to get. If that makes sense, you'll get a lot more like light leaks and flares in your shot too. The more wide open you get, the more of like a kind of a haze or a glow that you'll have as a lens flare. So really, man, it's what I would tell everybody. It's all about experimenting. So if you know what I would do, and most of the time you can change this stuff while you're up in the air, take your drone up, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 feet up and mess with those settings, you know, get into the, you know, if you can do it on your phone, take the aperture all the way down. Do you like how that looks? Is it too deep? Do you want to have a shallower depth of field? Do you want to only see the building that's right in front of you and have the mountains or the, you know, the landscape in the background fall off?
Right.
Then open up your aperture and screw on some neutral density.
That's
you know?
cool.
So it's really just about what you're trying to accomplish. But I know for me, like, I love when drone footage, whether it's a Red camera or an Alexa Mini up on a 8. What do they call those? Freefly has that one with 8 arms. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of it either.
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, do you want to see that detail? Do you want it to be shallow? Are you shooting at night? You may have to bump up that ISO and open wide up, take all the ND off so that you can get all that detail and it's not overly grainy.
Right.
So yeah, man, I think it's the name of the game is the least amount of grain possible.
Okay.
And if you want it, getting the detail in the distance, you're just gonna have to play with that mixture of you know, lower aperture and neutral density, or vice versa, to get, you know, kind of a glowy look or like a, you know, kind of more of a dreamy vibe too. So it just kind of depends on what you're going for.
That's so cool. I feel like, you know, when I've done automatic and I've, you know, dipped a toe into cloudy or sunshine or whatever these kind of settings are, I always feel like I'm going to capture something cool and then it's going to change, or like, because it's just, you know, there's going to be a wind gust and I'm going to hit the angle and the sun's going to hit differently. And then like all the colors and everything will change. So I think mine comes from just wanting to have continuity with that. But I'm sure in post you could add it, you know, edit and color correct some things too, to make it look even in cinematic, where it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I had 10 seconds, a really cool shot here and now it looks like crap. You know, how do I redeem it, you know, or how do I balance it?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, if you're wanting a professional shot, you have to get out of auto. You've got to get into manual everything, manual exposure, a manual color temperature. If you're on auto exposure and auto color temperature, that's where it almost just looks like you just shot it on an iPhone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's trying to figure out how to expose for the you know, the landscape and the sun, and then the colors are all over the place because you're pointing at the sun, then you're pointing away. So really, I would say, like, know what you're going for. You know, if you're kind of like shooting straight down over the water, and you're gonna stay there, make sure that you're set up for that shot.
That's a great point.
If you know that you're going to come from the water and come up into the city, try it a couple times. Try a couple different settings. You know, find a good, you know, middle ground where it's like maybe 2 stops under, 2 stops over for what you're exposing for.
Makes sense, yeah.
So just kind of practice that. You know, I personally love shooting into the sun because what happens is, and I talk about this in the Filmmaker Pro a lot, But when you're shooting something, whether it's an interview, whether it's a scene with like some kids playing outside or whatever it is, I love shooting into the light. You can even see I'm doing it right now. This camera is pointing at me, and this light is hitting the camera, and it's kind of giving this little bit of a glow.
Yep.
And it's kind of cutting me out of the frame. You see this like edge light that I have?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So you can apply that same principle outside too.
That's
so
cool.
when I'm shooting, if I'm shooting into a city or into it's got like a beautiful landscape, I want the sun coming towards the camera, toward the drone, because it's going to edge out the buildings. It's going to create some just beautiful, like it can do a beautiful glow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can do it the other way where like you're pointing at the side of it. So it's creating like a sun flare on the side, like this.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. But I typically never, and you'll notice this too. Sometimes if you shoot like at something and the sun is behind you, you catch the shadow of the drone, the shadow of the camera.
Yep.
So a good rule of thumb is to turn your angle, come at it from the other direction so you're flying into the sunlight, right?
That's cool.
So it creates like a really nice edge light and it just lights up the frame. So that's kind of just like a little trick of cinematography. Is most of the time you're going to want to shoot into the light, so it's creating a nice frame for you. But yeah, as far as color temperature and exposure, you just got to get out of auto and get into manual and set everything up and practice a few shots, watch it back. What do you like? What don't you like? So yeah, that's a couple things that I would recommend for sure.
No, that's super helpful. Yeah, I like that what you said earlier. You've said a lot of good things today, but the one thing I liked was when you were talking about if you're just shooting water, okay, that's your world that you're in right now. But yeah, transitioning from that and figuring out middle of the road is super helpful, because that's what I would see. Like the slightest little adjustments on the remote control, like, and then it's super sunny, it's all washed out, or vice versa, So that's been super helpful. Dude, I took a ton of notes. For proof, I'll show our viewers, like I've been taking, I don't know if that'll even, there we go.
There you go.
Bunch of notes and stuff. So this has been super helpful, and I'm excited to get out there and figure it out as well. We're almost done here, but I would love to, I want to make sure, a couple things really quick. Any kind of closing thoughts or anything that you're thinking of? And then I'd like to talk about Be Good briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of sharing the backstory about that. And then I'd like to somehow feature that, or I'm not sure, I'm kind of, spitballing here on the fly, but any kind of closing thoughts to shooting better video or telling story or whatever. I mean, we could go a million different directions, but.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, and I have a lot of students inside of the course that ask me this.
Right.
But the one thing that I would tell everybody that's watching is just go out and practice. Go out and shoot.
Yep.
Write a simple story, I've been at and this is a good segue into Be Good, but it's a film that I made while we're all in lockdown, right? Like I did a 2-minute short film that's getting some pretty good traction. I feel like it came out really well. I got other filmmakers involved from Italy, Chicago, Nashville, Cleveland. So I was really able to write a simple story about what we're going through right now in this lockdown. Tell it in a unique way from a unique perspective of a child. And we executed it really well. I think anytime that you can write a simple story, put some limitations on yourself.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, how can I shoot one simple story? Maybe it's a protagonist and an antagonist in a single location. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's something where like it's a lockdown situation where these two people for whatever reason hate each other and they got stuck because of lockdown in the same house. What kind of story can you write from that?
That's cool.
So try to put yourself, instead of like I can do anything, give yourself some limitations and create inside of those limitations. But to go back what I was saying earlier too, I think the best way to learn and the best way to grow is to just create. Don't give yourself any excuses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if this is all you have, do it. Practice. Shoot multiple angles. Get your coverage. Work on learning the 180-degree rule. Just practice. Watch other films. There's times where my wife hates it, but there's times where I'll watch movies and sometimes I just turn the sound off.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a frame and I'm like, why does this look so good? You know, and you can learn so much from that. Where's the light being motivated from? You know, I used to do this a lot. I don't do it as much now, but like, especially like The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan's one of my favorite movies. But Wally Pfister did a great job. And there's times where like I just freeze frame and I'm like, why does this look so good? You know?
Yeah.
And I study like, okay, so the light's coming from over here. They're lighting up background over here. They're edging him out. There's like a flare coming from this thing over here. So, you know, and the same thing with drone cinematography. If there's shots that you love, study them. What do you love about them?
Yeah, that's great.
What is the shadow telling you? You know, where's the light being motivated from? How are they framing that shot? Is it a 2.35 widescreen shot? Is it full 16:9? What's the movement look like? How fast are they, you know, panning? How fast are they tilting?
Yeah.
Is it a dolly? Are they doing a dolly zoom? Like, really just start studying it and then go out and practice. Go out and practice. Get into your editing, you know, get into Premiere, Final Cut, whatever you have. Start messing with color. You know, I think that's one of the best, one of the things that I think a lot of filmmakers, they try it and they give up because they don't practice enough.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's taken me 20 years to get where I'm at right now, living in LA, you know, working for big brands. It was really only like the past 5-6 years of my life that have been filled with like the good stuff, you know, like the big brands and doing a lot of passion projects. Prior to that, I would say from like 99 to about 2013, I was doing just like okay stuff.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and some people might get there faster. It might take some people longer, but if you really love this craft and you love the art form, master the craft. If you're a drone pilot, master that craft.
Yeah.
Learn it, master it, get your license, you know, because I'll tell you what, man, I hunt for really good drone pilots.
That's cool.
Because good drone cinematography, you can charge. I know a guy, you know, my day rate as a cinematographer is $2,500 a day.
Sweet.
I have no problem paying, you know, $1,500, $2,000 for an amazing drone pilot on the day that's going to give me shots that are just going to take my film from here to here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So practice your craft, learn it, fail, struggle, overcome those challenges. You know, anything in life, you know, it takes time to be good at something. You know, LeBron James didn't become LeBron James overnight. I'm watching that documentary on Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, which I love.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan was not Michael Jordan when he started.
Yeah.
He was cut from his high school basketball team, and he used those failures and those challenges, and he became the best player to ever play the game. Yes, Michael Jordan is better than LeBron James.
On the record.
But on the record. No, I think that's the biggest thing is don't be afraid. Don't worry if you're not as good as you want to be yet. Practice, fail, learn, and you'll get there eventually.
No, that's great. That's a great principle that applies to anything. And that's kind of goes back to how we opened the show is like, if you know Michael, he's good at everything he does. Like it's not just like, oh, he kind of started like, I see what you're going for there. No, you're like really good. You guys will see, explore his stuff. I did the Filmmaker Pro. I did the free class, which was amazing. A lot of cool surprises in there. I learned a lot from it. So make sure you check that out as well. We'll put a link in the show notes, of course. But yeah, I would love to know some more about, I know we have like a little bit of a recording here. We're almost done, but tell me about Be Good and how it came about.
So I was just sitting, I'm a musician, and I was sitting here one night and I was just playing this track, and it was kind of like this ambient kind of thing, and I just started playing it and just thinking about everything that's going on right now. I was like, you know what? I should just do some kind of like short film about what's going on. So started writing. This was like April 1st, probably.
Okay.
Just started writing some stuff, started writing music, and I was just like, man, I could probably do this. So I just did kind of like a feeler post on Instagram. And I was like, hey, if you're a filmmaker, would you be interested in shooting stuff in your city and sending it to me? So I created a brief in Google Docs, which was like, I'm looking for 4K footage, you know, from either like a Canon C series camera or Blackmagic 4K, 6K, or even a DSLR, just whatever, as long as it can shoot 4K. And I got about probably like 6 or 7 filmmakers that sent in footage. And I gave them like a list of what I was looking for, you know, people wearing masks, like empty city vibes, that kind of stuff. And I was really surprised. I got some great stuff. I had 600 gigs of footage to go through when it was all
What?
said and done
Oh my
between my
gosh.
stuff and other people. So I
Oh,
was constantly downloading from Google Drive every day,
wow.
eating up the Wi-Fi. My wife was and kids were frustrated.
Right.
Kids are trying to play Fortnite and they're like, "Why am I lagging?"
Right.
Like,
My ping
sorry,
is
I'm
through the roof. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, it just was kind of born from like a place of like, I'll say this. I've done a couple passion projects in the past, and one of them was Sink or Swim, and the other one was Pages. And both of those short films, they're passion projects, and both of those have been one of the reasons I got a job with Bridgestone, which was like a $40,000 commercial job. And most of the big jobs that I get, they're like, the creative directors or the producers are like, we watched your short film on this, and we just knew we had to have you on the job. Actually, Be Good, since I launched it, I've got one job that I got to send a proposal tomorrow. That's a $10,000 job in San Diego.
Sweet.
And another one that's a creative director in New York, and another lady that's she's kind of like a smaller like fitness kind of person, but she wants to talk tomorrow. So it's just like when you create this stuff, not only is it like personally creative fulfilling,
Yep.
but I say this a lot, you're auditioning for the work that you want to be doing.
That's
right?
great.
So
Yeah.
your
Great
passion
point.
projects are, look what I can do, and this is what I'm capable of. These are the kind of stories that I like telling.
Yep.
You're going to attract bigger brands that want to tell those kind of stories because they see that you can do it on your own, right? So that's kind of where it came from. I knew I just wanted to tell a unique story with a unique perspective from the eyes of a child because I have 3 kids. So I just knew that, it'd be easy to do, and just shot a ton of stuff over a few weeks and spent a week in the edit. I got a couple other guys involved in the writing just to like kind of like fine tune it, and that was it, man. So yeah, it's been shared by a lot of outlets, and hopefully we'll still get some traction with it. I've sent it to a lot of like news outlets and other like like Vimeo and like Mashable and all those other kind of things. So we'll see how it pans out. But I definitely think that if anybody wants to create something, look at what's happening in the world. Look at what's happening around you. When you create stories that have meaning that everybody can relate to, it has much more traction in the long run.
Yeah.
So I knew that like, hey, if I can do a story that's not all doom and gloom, it's not all about like staying home, it's not about wearing masks, it's just about the general general idea of what we're going through and showing it through a unique perspective and giving people some hope.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a little bit of hope, right?
Yeah.
So I just knew that it was a story that I needed to tell, and I'm super happy that I did. It's been doing well, and so that's
so
the
cool.
story on that.
Yeah, it looks incredible. And you guys, I mean, being out in LA, like I'm in, Belleville, Ohio, in the center of the state. I'm mostly about 45 minutes north of Columbus. And so we're a town of a little less than 2,000, like 1,907 people. And so how we've been affected and impacted has been totally different. This, our city versus then enlarging to Ohio versus LA and California. I mean, it's been crazy. Even New York has been, it's been terrible for people. So it does resonate. And I recently had the opportunity, because of this whole COVID thing, they there's no graduations right now for seniors, and so the mayor of the town that I live in asked me to do like a video. She mentioned it and saw some of my drone footage before, and I did this video of the class of 2020 graduating and driving their cars through downtown and
Cool.
different places, and it turned out really cool, and it was really sweet because it wasn't like, hey, check me out, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like I didn't put I didn't put anything at the end, I just felt like this would be gross, but it was cool, and like probably in about a week we got about 1,400 views, which is like huge for me because I'm like used to like 3 views, But I think it registered just with people's hearts, and it's super sad. And so for me, like you Cut Me, I Bleed, like Thomas Newman, like soundtrack, Finding Nemo, Shawshank. Like I just have this kind of melancholy thing that comes out. And so I was like, I'm going to make kind of a sad video. And they're like, we should do Rocket Man. I was like, I don't think I want to do Rocket Man because that was like their class song. But once I started working with the footage in slow and still, kind of like the stuff that you've written for Music Bed and different things like that, I'm like, I can jive with that. That's kind of my MO. But it was really fun, just to take this time that this families are going through, and we shot, on iPhones. We did drone footage. We did close-ups, and my daughter had a her camera, and then my wife also had just an iPhone 6S just to capture some audio of it. And we put it all together, and it really made you feel like you were there, because honestly, some people can't come out, like they are able to, or it's too risky or whatever. So
Yeah.
it was just a lot of fun to share that, you know what I mean? And you're doing it at such a high level, high scale, which is so cool. But it's just telling stories and taking people on the journey of, this is what it's like. And if you can't make it to this or don't know what it's like in LA, here's a great footage of it. So we're definitely going to share out we'll share out the video for sure so people can see it, so they know what we're talking about. But man, this has been great. We are pretty much at time. But Michael, thanks so much for coming on. One more time, if you just promote away your website and the Filmmaker Pro and all that.
Sure, man. Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's thefilmmakerpro.com. You can go, all you have to do is enter in your email address, and you get access to a free 45-minute film class. Super helpful. It's very insightful. You'll learn a lot. And then my personal work is michaelcamenetifilms.com.
Okay.
You can see the Be Good video, and then all the commercial work that I've done as well. So,
that's great. Michael, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. I've learned a ton. Like I said, took a ton of notes, but thanks for helping me be a better drone pilot, better storyteller, cinematographer, all those things. I really appreciate your time.
For sure, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.